How's the playhouse coming?
You
seen it?
I haven't been that way yet. Lately.
We got our slide yesterday.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Now you need a sandbox.
We'll see.
Yeah.
My father-in-law's doing it for us.
Oh, well, that's nice. Yeah, awesome.
You should ask John. He's doing a greenhouse, I saw.
Oh, in town, yeah.
Yeah. He's talented.
She learned from my father-in-law.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mr. Mayor, it's time.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you remain standing just for a moment of silence. We just got word earlier, Mr. Lindeman brought us word that Larry Blasky, a former editor and publisher of the local newspaper, passed away today, Mitch?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday. Just like to have a moment of silence for him. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Donald Hewish,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales,
Present.
Councilmember Mitch Lindeman,
Here.
Councilmember Fanny Acosta, Councilmember Ray Shelton, Councilmember Michael Valdenegro,
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva,
Here.
Interim City Manager Don Prince, here. City Attorney Juan Pablo Flores,
Present.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa,
Present.
and Mr. Mayor, for the record, council members Acosta and Shelton are running a little bit late.
Thank you very much. If the council doesn't have any issues with it, I'd like to move agenda item 6 up to the position of number 4, or the next item on the agenda. Does anybody have any objection to that?
No.
Okay, then we'll take item number 6 first. Presentation discussion regarding proposed amendments to section 8.28 of the Douglas Municipal Code related to noise. Chief Fuller?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What you have before you for the work session is some proposed changes to the existing noise ordinance within the Douglas Municipal Code. These amendments that are being proposed for your consideration are intended to clarify the definition of unreasonable noise, list general and specific prohibitions, list general and temporary exemptions, include a provision for responsible party for purposes of our enforcement, and includes the progression of enforcement, including civil and criminal provisions, and establishing the resulting penalties. As council and the mayor may be aware, we do regularly receive complaints for noise within the boundaries of the city limits. Some of our past challenges with our existing ordinance is some ambiguity in how the ordinance is structured, in that certain noises only apply at certain hours of the day, primarily in the nighttime hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So some of the modifications that are in here are intended to clarify what noises apply at what time. Again, that's kind of the difference between general prohibitions and specific prohibitions. The proposed changes were provided as an amendment or an attachment to this item. I don't know if all of you have had a chance to review that. I will go over it just quickly to kind of point out some of the highlights that we are looking to try and accomplish with this. Again, as far as adding some clarification to the definition for unreasonable noise, we're looking at defining that as any loud, unnecessary, or unusual noise that is excessive, disruptive, and or which annoys or disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities, or endangers or injures the safety or health of humans or animals, or endangers or injures personal or real property. The key there is the added term of unnecessary. A lot of the complaints that we receive are the result of unnecessary noise. A lot of it's loud music that is either coming from vehicles or from neighboring properties. As far as the
Chief, could I ask you real quick? So you're saying unnecessary, so like a work site or something like that, construction site would not that portion of the construction process would not be unnecessary, but if they had a loud, I'm dating myself, but boombox going on, that could be considered unnecessary.
That's how I would view that, yes.
Okay.
So the work itself, or the noise attributed to the work itself, would be necessary, whereas the music would not be.
Okay.
Again, under the general prohibitions, it is kind of delineated to where it is loud, unnecessary, unusual, excessive, disruptive. If it's continuous or intermittent for a period of at least 15 minutes, or if it's occurring, again, between those hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., and it's plainly audible beyond the property boundaries.
Can I hold you right there, Chief? Can you please note that Mrs. Acosta is here
Yes,
now?
thank you.
Thank you.
The one thing I do want to point out, and I apologize to Mayor and Council, item F under the general prohibitions, speaking of construction, operating, using or permitting or operating tools, that section there was actually an edit after my submission. And the way it's worded here, both F and G prevent some challenges with the enforcement, because as it's worded here, it would basically make it a violation to do any work at your home, including mowing your lawn, at any time of the day, any day of the week. So that will have to be revised and brought back before you. So that section had actually been withdrawn from the ordinance and kind of clarified in a different section. I'll get to that here in a minute. The rest of the section there is largely unchanged. The next section for specific prohibitions looks to address the issue that we have with, again, the loud music or amplified music from vehicles or from residences where it crosses one property boundary to another. This here allows us to determine that level of music at a measurable distance versus a measurable decibel. So if we can hear the music or feel the impact from the bass, if you will, at a distance of 50 feet from the source, then that would be considered a violation. The added benefit in the rewording here is it doesn't matter what time of day. So any time of day when that occurs, it would be considered a violation. That's also serving us as a secondary in public safety. If they're in a vehicle and they're traveling and their music is that loud, I'm not sure how they would be able to hear an audible warning such as a vehicle horn, a siren from an emergency vehicle, or law enforcement if we're trying to pull them over. If it's that loud, they won't be able to hear us, and that creates a danger for them as well as the rest of the motoring public. So that's a secondary benefit of having that. Under the general exemptions, Mr. Mayor, you talked about the construction, and under F, in that section, paragraph F, so construction, repair, remodeling, demolition, lawn or yard work, wood cutting, including crafts and hobbies, would be restricted from 6 a.m. or allowable from 6 a.m. through 8 p.m. is what's being proposed. And so those activities would be permissible from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Devices in conjunction with places of religious worship, non-commercial public speaking and public assembly activities conducted on public property or public right-of-way would also be exempt, as well as activities that have been permitted by the city as an athletic, musical, or cultural activity, parades, concerts, festivals, fairs, and similar activities.
Chief, before you move on, going back to the construction portion of it, reasoning behind 8 p.m. versus somewhat standard 10 p.m. amongst everything else?
That was the time that was listed in one of the ordinances that I referred to, and looking at some of the modifications to our ordinance, and given the amount or the amount of noise or the loudness of the noise was kind of a consideration, where I would say the majority of that type of work, where it's construction or demolition or repairs, happen during daylight hours and not necessarily into the evening hours, like at 8 o'clock or past 8 o'clock. Certainly that can be moved back to 10 o'clock. It was just a thought.
Please.
First of all, I don't have a copy of that, and I'm kind of disappointed that I don't have that.
It's in.
It's not.
It's in the attachment. At the record.
And then it's in the next tab over. So you see this right here. And this is it.
Oh, okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm not technical.
No. It took me I don't know how long to click on those.
Thank you very much.
A few hundred
I
times.
would rather have paper. As I see, you have paper.
Which I came down early and printed.
I would rather have that.
Okay.
I think we're old school.
Okay, so
My other question.
if any of the council is, these type of things which the print small and all that kind of good stuff, if you want a printed copy, just, send a quick email over to Damien or Don, and they'll have it printed for you whenever you'd like it, for future reference.
Thank you very
And
much.
you can get one today too, before you leave if you
Well,
want.
now that you showed me, maybe I can try and
Okay.
catch up. My question here is that, what if we have a family birthday party and it kind of goes till 9 or so? And I don't want to do anything that precludes that from our community. So that's why, 8 o'clock, and of course, 6 to 10 was originally, I thought, in there. So we should have just left it like.
About 2 hours difference.
I think this is specifically referring to construction.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Lemon, that is correct. So this section is specific to construction and related activities versus in your example, that would be reverting back to the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see at the bottom, it's at 8-35 if there's pages at the bottom.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
That's
that's subject, section F, top left of that page. My concern about 8 o'clock is when I was younger, Mama wanted a project done, and getting home from work, and we worked on it till 10 o'clock because cutting tile or some things that were a little bit louder that could be disturbing, especially in a smaller lot neighborhood. So that's the only reason why I was curious of reasoning behind that. But I would think 10. But I don't know what the rest of the council.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mrs. Acosta?
I would also, just from personal experience and people that I know that work during, regular business hours, and they kind of use their time off after 5 to do some work. And like you said, sometimes there's projects that need to be done, and you only have a certain limited amount of time. Obviously, you don't want that kind of noise at a very late time, but 8 seems a little early.
Fair enough. If we move it to 10 o'clock, that would remain consistent throughout.
Mr. Grijalva, please.
I just wanted to say, and it makes us business friendly, and a lot of the time when those construction things are going around at a household, that household tends to tell the block, hey, that there might be some noise, so everybody can understand that. I don't think there's going to be a lack of communication there. So I'd also like to agree that 10, You know, it just sounds business friendly from a city perspective.
Thank you. Ms. Andrade, would you please note that Mr. Shelton is with us with smiling face behind his mask?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, I'd like to
Please.
point out also, perennial problem down here, if you can call it a problem, is that it is loud during certain times of the party season from AP. And I realize that, nothing can be done about that, but I can hear crystal clear all hours of the night, in fact, all night, a lot of times, for Fiesta Patrias and all that stuff. So, I don't know if you can pinpoint something that's, unless you're driving around listening. I just don't know if anything can ever be recommended over that.
Yeah, true. Chief, why don't you go ahead and finish up with some of the changes? It's my fault, I interrupted, so.
No worries. That's the whole purpose of this. So, as far as the other provisions, there are temporary exemptions that are authorized through the office of the city manager or their designee to grant a temporary exemption if they feel that it's in the best interest of the city. There are limitations on that unless otherwise specified, and that's kind of laid out there as well. It does speak to hardship for both the city as well as the person making the request for the exemption. Again, under section 8.28060, the bottom of 8-35, we added the provision for responsible party. Sometimes when we respond to noise complaints, it's not specifically clear who's responsible or who the homeowner is. This allows us to use some leverage in applying or making certain persons present or the property owner responsible at some point in the process. And then again, under the enforcement aspect, it does give the officers the discretion to alternatively cite. What we're striving for in any enforcement is education first and self-compliance. So that's typically how we start with a noise complaint, is making the property owner, vehicle owner aware of the complaint and ask them to self-comply. If they do not, then the provision here would be to escalate to the issuance of a civil citation under the ordinance. And then if it's a continued issue, then we have the opportunity to cite for a criminal violation. If we have a problem property that has continuous noise complaints and there are third or subsequent violations occurring within a 120-day period, then they're subject to a criminal citation. And again, it reverts back to the responsible party. So if it's a rental property and the tenant happens to be the one in violation, but yet the property owner is aware of it, that it's a continuing issue, then we could potentially look at bringing the property owner into this as well and making them responsible. As far as a violation, at the bottom of 8-36, we would look at imposing the first violation a minimum fine of $100, second violation at $250, third or subsequent violation would be considered a Class 3 misdemeanor and subject to a $500 fine. And that's pretty much the extent of the recommended changes.
Thank you, Chief. Council, questions, input? Mr. Valdenegro?
Chief, is there anything for a weekend, like a permit to go beyond the 10?
There's not in here unless it would be a special event that the city is looking to either authorize or sponsor.
So I'm talking for residential.
There's nothing that's included in there for that, no.
I think there should be something there for a weekend in case somebody decides to have a party, graduation party, sometimes go 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Friday and Saturday, I think it should be something added.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you have a family get together and people travel from distances, they want to see each other and they shouldn't be having to stop what they're doing. So, you know, I go to midnight, you know, or something like that.
After we get the permit to the city, to the dispatcher, or, you know, make them aware that there would be a party until 12 o'clock with high noise.
Any other thoughts from the council, Mr. Grijalva?
I was gonna say I go to sleep when the sun goes down, so I don't know how you all still party past 12, but I was
Duly noted.
you know, I like that idea. Maybe if they can get the people who are going to be affected by it to maybe, you know, get the block to sign, you know, a petition and say, you know, my block's okay with it. We're gonna have a party on this day. The music might be a little bit loud, but they understand. Now they can be exempt through that if the community understands. I think the focal point should be the community if they understand. And a lot of the times when you have birthday parties, I mean, they know the music can get a little loud, but they understand. Birthday parties don't go up until 2, 3 in the morning, so I think we should accommodate them also.
Thank you. Anybody else like to chime in?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
It's
Ms.
fine.
Morales?
Chief Olin. So, have you been receiving a lot of complaints lately, and is there a certain section of Douglas that you're receiving these complaints?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Morales, it's an ongoing issue with complaints. The last ones I've received have been for loud music coming from vehicles early morning hours. Seems like people that are going to work or maybe coming home from work that are responsible for that. And we do have complaints regarding loud parties at houses. A lot of them are post-graduation parties and just family get-togethers. So I just would add as a point of observation, if we were to consider permitting for special occasions or special parties, it presents some challenges because then it kind of makes a question in my mind, then what's the purpose of the ordinance? And I understand it's not all the time. I just think that it kind of goes back to the question of necessary versus unnecessary as far as noise goes. Just my 2 cents.
And you bring up a very good point, and my thoughts are is that we're talking two different things. One's party and one's excessive music, excessive noise. I don't think that there's much heartburn of people gathering until midnight at all. But the music at this decibel, when it hits 10 o'clock, needs to come down to this decibel. And I think that's the difference. And I also like Councilman Grijalva's idea. I mean, we want to be a community, and you know, if somebody's going to do that, they should take the time and effort to go around to their neighbors and say, hey, I'm going to have a gathering this Saturday. It's my daughter's quinceañera, and we're decided to have it at home, and it's just going to be family. But you know, we will be actively, the lights will be on in the backyard, and et cetera, kind of things. But I personally would not be in favor to move it on the weekends. And the reason being is because we don't know all of what's going on around us. We may have elderly that, you know, would disturb quite a bit past the 10 o'clock hour. And even people like Mr. Grijalva, who's, you know, past 7:30 is not acceptable to him. People working shift work, you know, et cetera, and so those type of things. And I don't mind the gatherings, and again, I encourage that we do. I'm not encouraged that we gather outside our family at this point in time. But I think it would be a nightmare in many aspects to try to differentiate. But again, the gathering's fine. It's just the noise level needs to come down at 10 o'clock. And you know, it's amazing. You know, you bring up the example of the fiestas in September. I mean, you know, you hear them on 8th Street, I hear them on 11th Street, and we can hear them all over the place. But you have you have a band playing, you know, which isn't as common anymore as it was back in the 70s and 80s. But when you can hear them from 3 blocks away, it's not acceptable. And no matter what time of day it is. So I think it'd be a disservice to put upon the police department to worry about, you know, is it Friday or is it Saturday? And so I that's my input on doing that. Any more thoughts? Yes, Mr. Lindeman.
I was just wondering, what is your opinion on the measurable cutoff, like 100 decibels? Do you want to, do you think that would be valid to put into the ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lindeman, the challenge with that is if we specify decibels, then we have to purchase decibel meters to be able to go out there and take a reading. Whereas if we keep it restricted to the language that's here where it speaks to the property line, essentially if the noise has to stop at your property line. So your noise can't encroach upon the property line of somebody else, and theirs can't encroach upon yours. That's a little bit easier for us to measure, a little bit quicker for us to measure, with some, you know, wiggle room on either side of that. But going back to the earlier point, if it's, you know, past 10 o'clock at night and you're in your bedroom and you can hear the neighbor's music or the music coming from 3 blocks away, we would all agree that's probably excessive and needs to be turned down.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shelton, please.
I'll agree with our mayor. And you took my thunder away, almost word for word. But I think it needs to stay at 10 o'clock because you could have younger children next door trying to sleep. You could have, once again, elderly people on shift work. There's a number of them that work for customs and border patrol and other things. And there's a lot of people that work even on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday. So I think we need to leave it at 10 and all of the things that the mayor said plus a couple of others there. I think just be respectful, and I'm like you, if we start changing it, then everybody will get confused and end up in an argument and whatever.
So
I would say let's leave it.
Thank you. Part of these work sessions is to get these ideas out here and discuss them. And so this will be up for a formal vote in 2 weeks at our regular meeting. In August, it'll be all finalized. Am I correct, Chief? And Don, that's what it looks like. And so, you know, those type of things, you know, talk to people, see what they think, and then we can come back and we can decide whether we want to do an exception on the weekend or not. We've talked about into that, but I'd like to appreciate everybody's input. I'd also like to continue moving along so that, you know, my goal was to keep us here no more than an hour. And this is one that I thought that we would take a little less time on. So I'm not trying to hurry you, but I'm also want to make sure that if there are specific issues or between tonight and then shoot them to Ms. Prince and she'll get an answer for you, and we'll, you know, bounce them around with staff to see where we want to be. And that's the purpose of having these discussions ahead of time.
Mayor, can I make
Yes,
one more
please,
comment?
please.
I don't want this to drag out.
No, please do.
My comment is just, you know, up north, it's not uncommon to have block parties and you know, or street dances. And it's one of those things that I don't know if it's, you know, that area or the country, but it would be fun. And we get everybody involved and have picnic tables, all our people's lawns and stuff like that. I know it doesn't probably pertain to this, but that's my comment.
No, it's true. And like I say, being a good neighbor involves a lot more. It's going around inviting your neighbor to come to your gathering. You know, being upfront and discussing them with them. You know, is there an issue if we go a little bit longer? You know, to keep the lights on a little bit longer. You know, those kind of things. We'll try to hold it down, etc. So that's what I encourage, and that's why I appreciate Chief Fullen's remarks of, you know, we want to educate, we want to try to resolve it at the lowest level we can resolve it at, and, keep it forward. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to throw in there? Mr. Grava?
I just wanted to mention, maybe, for the next meeting, we could get different, maybe on the fines, because when you look at $100, that might not allow the officer to pull the trigger, in a sense, and to get the fine out. Because for me, it sounds a little bit excessive for the first time. Maybe if we could do like $50 and say, okay, this is the starting point. It's sort of in the middle, and then we could get to the bigger fines to let them know. I just think that, maybe $100 on the second time, because that's when it would be on the second time. A lot of people would say, well, I didn't know it was going to be that much, or just for a little noise, maybe we could start off small, and then if it keeps going, raise it to the point of the 500, like you said.
Thank you. You bring up a good point, and I overlooked that because, and I don't know what comparison we have. Is there any comparable type things, Mr. Flores or anybody else, that of similar type violations? Do they start at 100? Do they start at 50? What's the normal? Like junkie yards citations.
I think the operative number for nuisances is $50. And obviously these are 100, and so council should know, if they want to make a difference between the $50 typical fine and the $100 here, they want to differentiate between the activities. That's a consideration to make.
Okay. I would prefer 50 myself also. Anybody, any thoughts?
I would just say that,
Please.
like Chief Fulton mentioned earlier, officers are going to do what they can to educate first. I mean, if somebody's being persistent with their noise and not listening to the warnings or hey, your music is affecting others around your residence. I mean, I understand $50, $100, but it just seems like, if you're already been getting a warning, it doesn't seem like the officers are going to come out and issue a citation right away. If as a citizen, you just persist and don't want to lower your noise level.
That would get your attention.
Well,
And
I think that's the
bottom line.
point
Yeah.
of this too. So, it's not trying to get out there and find everybody with loud music on their first try. You're giving them an opportunity. And I guess this is kind of like, okay, you don't listen. Sorry, but.
And they would be informed, right? I mean, the officer would say, hey, it needs to go down. If you don't comply, you're looking at a $100 fine. And so that's the other option.
Mr. Mayor.
So please, Mrs. Morales.
If you were to adjust that to $50, then your second violation would go to $250. So that's kind of a steep jump from 50
Well,
to 250. So
I think it would adjust all the way down. It'd probably go to 50, 100, 250. Where right now it's 100, 250, 500.
Yeah.
But any other, Mr. Valdenegro?
Like, that's why I'm saying, if you issue out a permit through the dispatcher, you eliminate these fines. You know what I mean?
Well, but I think the purpose of
I know what you mean.
this
I know.
being is noise is noise.
Noise is noise, I know, so you should keep
So-
it at $100. That way you get to the point. The officer's presence, taking him off the road, making his appearance at that house.
Yeah.
I already cost the city $50, more or less, to take him off the road.
Yeah.
So him being there and giving officer
Well,
presence and
do a
time,
very,
hey,
very good point. Very
gotta
good
turn
point.
it down, and next time I come over, it's gonna be $100 fine.
Okay, so there's a couple issues that we need to decide on between now and 2 weeks, and those are options. And you bring up very good points, and that's why I love this discussion.
Yeah, Mayor.
Please,
In light of that, I would agree with Mrs. Acosta, because if you've already given your chances, and, it should be a little painful if you can't.
Good point.
If you can't comply.
Good point. Yeah, it's not like we're gonna walk out there and, okay, boom, here's your citation. If that was the case, maybe 50 is better. But if you've been warned once, twice, I'm gonna guess, maybe even 3 times before they'll write you something. I'm guessing, just guessing. If you're belligerent, I'm sure you may get it a lot quicker than that, but good points.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
The time frame that, Chief, that you said for the 120 days, is that the standard with the other cities, or is that just coming out from our ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Grijalva, that was referenced in one of the other ordinances that I took from a different city. And I see the application locally, just and it gives them an opportunity to comply, and it gives us leverage to enforce on those problem properties.
Great. Anybody else? Mr. Shelton, did you have anything else?
Now, what if they don't pay? Can we take it out of their water bill?
I think I'd
I
have
don't
to
think
defer
so.
that one to the city attorney on that.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor, may I address?
Please, Mr. Flores.
Before I address that question, I want to clarify. I gave an answer earlier for $50. I just looked it up. My memory failed me. It's actually not less than $25 for a nuisance. That certainly would seem to me that's a little bit low for the amount of time staff spends on it, but regardless. With reference to fees and assessments, according to the city charter, there is a provision there that we've used in the past if people owe money on, particularly on garbage and sewer and water, okay? That you can place a lien on their homes. But the situation you might run into here is that you may end up citing somebody that's renting and you can't necessarily lien the property. But that's in fact an enforcement issue that would be dealt through the court consolidation process. But if I had to give you an answer right now, I don't think you can lien somebody's property as a result of a municipal fine having to do with noise.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? Wonderful. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Move on to agenda item number 4, presentation discussion on special event policy and request for city sponsorship. Ms. Smith, adjust the microphone. Yeah, this is now an officially a good meeting because when you leave with more papers than when you got here, it's an officially a good meeting.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. I wanted to start off by thanking you guys for having the work session. I think it's important, especially for this initial phase for the special event policy, and gaining your feedback on how we should process the special event requests received by organizations that are addressed to the city. Make sure this is working.
okay.
And this is typically to use sports leagues, adult sports leagues, organization hosting community events, and other one-time and miscellaneous events. Some of these examples are like AYSO, Little League, adult men's soccer and softball, vaccination clinics, the turkey trot, real estate mixers, Douglas fiestas, church festivities, art projects, parades, and car shows. Through this process, an application is filled out and the list of information is obtained. What you have on the PowerPoint is basically what the Douglas Municipal Code deems to for us to ask on the application process. It's your general information, and And also the processing fee, which includes a $1 million insurance policy that names the city as additional insured. And this is usually obtained, easy to obtain if an organization already has insurance through their company, or you can purchase one, which is sometimes difficult for the organization. And
Ms. Smith, that's required by state law, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. That's the requirement that the city has had on the code, and maybe
And Mr. Flores?
If I may, excuse me, Mayor, members of council, the reason we have that is because they're using city property, and if somebody gets injured on city property, we want to make sure that will cover from a liability perspective. And basically it makes their insurance policy the primary responsible party. So it's not necessarily by law, but it's just, I think it's just good practice.
Thank you.
so the policy stated it's usually easy to be obtained when you have a company. You just name the city as additional insured on the certificate. We've also had some issues with that I'll explain briefly. And the type of sponsorships that are received by the city, they're usually 3 types. They can be summed up to 3 types. One of them is monetary support, the other one is in-kind, and the third one is a combination of monetary and in-kind support. The submission of these requests are received 2 different ways. They can be received by through the finance committee, and they go through the budget approval process. Some of you may remember from the budget meetings, we talked about several events that had requested some sponsorship that are not by the city. And the other, and they're typically in-kind, is a letter to the city manager or to city staff that requests these in-kind services so that way they can host their event. In-kind services are usually the requests for resources, equipment, stage rental, bleachers, chairs, tables, and sometimes the insurance coverage, which places the organization under the city's insurance umbrella. And why we're here, the basis of tonight's discussion is really to allow for a robust conversation and regarding these special event requests, so that way we can create a sound policy moving forward at a future council meeting. From last year, some of you may remember that we had some organizations come forward that we worked with in the past. One of them is the Douglas Merchants for their street fair, and the dates for that have changed depending on the season and what's going on right now. One example is COVID. They had their street fair planned for early spring, and now they're going to have to push it back, and it's still postponed at this moment. The other is the Sons of the American Legion for their annual Veterans Day Parade, and the Douglas Street Rods. These requests came in, and they all vary on what they're asking for. The Douglas Merchants are more looking for a partnership for the city because they feel that this is in benefit to both the city and the Douglas Merchants and to help revitalize the downtown area. They were able to meet all the requirements, including the insurance requirement. The last 2 requests that are pending were more of the difficulty to obtain insurance, which costs each of them about $600. And that was just creating a burden for them. So we still have these pending and outstanding requests that we haven't addressed yet because we are looking at our policy right now. And currently the Title 12.40 of the DMC, it doesn't define that process for us. It doesn't provide that procedure of how we obtain this request. Historically, it's just been done, the 2 ways I mentioned, as a letter to the city manager or through the finance process. So with that, I have some probing questions, and you also have a handout that discusses a sample policy that we can create. And again, this isn't the initial phase, and we thought it was just important to bring this forward and get your feedback on these considerations. There's also samples under the bold sentences, so that way we've seen those on different policies, so I added those in there. And again, it's just really hearing the feedback that Mayor and Council have on the matter, and allowing us to move forward and create a policy for the public. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Smith. There are, Mr. Grijalva, I know you've been wanting to discuss this, so.
As far as the first thing I wanted to say was, and then we can discuss it as a whole. We're a Purple Heart city, so if they're a nonprofit and they're veterans, I think that the city should automatically look to sponsor something like that. It's for our community, and we should do what we can for our veterans. That's my opinion.
So is Mr. Grijalva, so how would that work into a policy? Would that, you suggest that would be specific in whatever we decide, that we name certain type of activities or certain type of people that would come forward, we would automatically be authorized to partner with? I think what the general purpose, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Prince, is to try to give staff a direction so that they can easily refer to when these type of people come in, and ask for the city to, as the previous slide showed, that we want your help with bleachers, we want this, that, and the other, so they can just refer to that and feel comfortable that they're trying to treat everybody the same.
No, as far as where it says the Veterans Day Parade, talking to the American Legion, that's all they've asked for. So if a non-profit veterans group wants to have a parade, I think we should fulfill the request for the liability insurance.
So that, please.
If I may, I'm going to go over these questions real quick and then
Okay.
kind of elaborate a little bit. That way you can provide the feedback. The handout that you have is a sample of one of these policies from the city of Novato. And I mean, it's kind of what the staff was looking for, but again, I think this feedback from mayor and council is really critical in order to develop something that's going to be a benefit to the city. So one of the first
So this is an actual city?
I think so. Found it on Google.
I mean, if it would have said Vato, I would really be skeptical, but
We've
I'll
done our
Google Vato.
research. We've done our research. We looked at the city's surrounding areas. Not many people have a policy, this invasive that really goes over. We just felt like a lot of important stuff are outlined in this policy, which include what type of events the city should sponsor. The criteria is something community-based, a benefit to the city. Past council had said, and I believe it was Councilmember Hewish at the time, now mayor, that high-profile events that would be a benefit to the residents. It would be free to the public, not-profit, strategic focus that would go within our strategic plan. We talk about partnership in that and reaching out to other our sister cities, and that would be an idea as well. Non-repetitive with other city events, just because if we have one event and then they make it through this process and we're doing double the event versus spreading out those resources. An attendance minimum. In the past, I've seen some events where the cities put a lot of resources and we agreed to sponsor, but we have maybe 10 to 15, 20 at the most, and it's just so much of our resources that went into that, and it's not a benefit, I believe, to the city at that point. And what type of event should the city not sponsor? I think that's a question you should also keep in mind. We don't necessarily have to address it, but something that within our values and stuff that we'd have to put in there as well. And then again, the criteria that I mentioned at the first question. And then the process. The process can go several ways. It can be as is, a letter to the city and going through the finance committee. It can be a committee an internal committee that we set up with the deputy city manager, leisure services, and that's part of our application approval process too. We send it to police, fire, parks, depending on what that affects. So we can create a committee that would be able to evaluate and look at that criteria to make sure it meets it as well. There's also other processes like a grant process it can go through, or an affiliate program that we've seen as well. And then there's just, you know, I mean, if you have any other considerations that we can look into, we definitely.
So do we have at least a informal policy that people need to request? Like, do we try to fit it in towards the budget process? In other words, they need to get their request in by February 1st so that we can put it, see if it even fits in the budget process, or to go through this committee, or is it, hey, I'd like to do something September 1st, here's my information, tell me if you can help.
Mayor, do you wish, I know that Luis Pedrosa communicates with those at our annual organizations that come, you know, request that sponsorship. Some of them are, I think, Rotary, Meals on Wheels program, so they are aware of the process. We also have the other part of that, that's the application process, where they, you know, they want to have, for one example is at Fiestas Patrias, and they do the application process, but the other part of that, if they're requesting sponsorship, we don't necessarily have anything in the code that tells us, like, this is the way that they go through. I guess it's been by default, and it's worked, you know, if it's monitored and they do it ahead of time, because then council can kind of look at that and forecast it, but we don't have an actual program go to where we have this policy. It's more just kind of how we've done that, and I think that's the reason this policy is going forward, to make sure that we have this in our code, so that way we can guide the public or organizations when they come to us. And also with the changes we've had in the past few years, we have some of these organizations that are kind of in limbo, depending on what the approval was 2 years ago, and you know, this year it kind of changed on them. So there's frustration with some of these organizations as well, but I have been communicating with them. I let them know that we're going through you know, the provision and policy, so that way it's, you know, we can serve them as best as we can.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can chime in.
Please.
Part of why we're bringing this forward, like Jim mentioned, is because we have some inconsistencies in how we're handling these events. So we have people who know the process to go to finance, and then other individuals who don't. So they come to us and say, we want to do this event, and here's what we want the city to participate in. And our policy does not speak about what we can or not choose to do. When we start to follow through with the policy, then it's like it doesn't really say that, and so, you know, we're trying to just get some clarification so that we can move forward as staff, so we can be consistent, so that the community members who want to do events have an understanding of what that process looks like, whether it's through finance or whether it's through leisure services, and that's what we're looking for from the city council, just related to this, from the mayor and council.
Anybody else? Yes, Mrs. Acosta.
I just wanted clarification on the, I know you mentioned that for the Veterans Day Parade, they're looking at approximately $600 insurance policy just for the event. Is that something that would be added to our insurance? Are we looking at an insurance premium going up if we sponsor a certain amount of these private events, or what are we looking at to be spending, I guess, on that?
So Mayor, Councilmember Acosta, we're going to have Lucio come up and talk a little bit about that as our insurance policies to go through the Human Resources Department, so she'll be able to answer that better.
So, yeah, Mayor, members of the council, good evening, I'm Mayor before. Yes, the liability insurance will go up because at the beginning of the year, we have to give them a list of the events that we hold for the city. So the more that events that we have, they're going to be looking at, sometimes, you know, adding one more event is not going to be, you know, it's not going to do anything. But if we start adding a number of events that are going to, you know, especially parades, because parades are the ones that have the most liability to them, and that's known through all liabilities, that's going to create a higher cost for us. I don't know to what extent, but it is likely that once we start adding more events, it would be harder for us. The other option is that we have been considering doing a TULIP program, adding that to our insurance. Sorry, my mask is pulling in. Where we do provide that to the whomever's requesting it, and they go directly through the insurance. they buy what's called a TULIP. It's like a tenant liability insurance, and it can cost them anywhere from $75 to $300, depending on the type of event that it is. So we are looking into that. I'll follow up with our brokers just to make sure that that's a consideration that we can add to our insurance, but they deal directly with the insurance themselves. So whomever wants the event, they can go directly to them and request that. Because depending on if there's going to be alcohol, the number of attendants, if they're going to be charging for the event, then it goes up. But yes, parades are the ones that cost the most, and that's why we pay $600 for them, because it doesn't seem like they cover parades, so that it's actually adding something additional to their insurance for the American Legion.
I just think it's something that we need to consider. I mean, obviously, I would love to support, especially the Veterans Day Parade. But again, if we get into the business of adding all these different events, that's also something that the community is paying for in the long run. So thank you for that information.
And it goes back to what do we want to do, how, and that's why I appreciate Ms. Smith putting up there the strategically focused as far as what our strategic plan, what we were working on last week, and we'll finalize next week. That those type of things, if we feel it's important, then I think we need to go forward. And I love that idea of if they can kind of piggyback off of us, but still do their own thing. But there's certain events, like Mr. Grijalva expressed his thoughts on that maybe we should get along and get behind. And so those type of events, if we had a list at budget time or whenever, of saying this is what we're looking at and this is what our history's been, and I think it would, at least I would feel more comfortable in saying, for sure, let's pursue these, and then we have these other policies that will come. And I think it also protects us, and we have to figure out, some requests are flat out unreasonable. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I don't know how you guys deal with it, but if as we develop this policy, I mean, we'll have it right there, so staff can say, our budget won't allow us to be able to do that. So those type of things I think need to all be integrated in this, and I personally appreciate a special events type committee. That, I mean, we kind of have it now, but it's more of, okay guys, we have this event coming up, here, send me somebody so we can figure out how it's all going to happen. So I think ahead of time, I think it would be beneficial. Anybody else have thoughts or comments?
A couple of ideas. The city also already sponsors things like 4th of July, Christmas, we do Douglas Days, and that is already, I believe, in the budget for those type of things. And it wouldn't be much to put the Veterans Day Parade in that auspices, but any of the other events, we have to have a committee to look at those things and say, well, if the cost is minimal to put a rider on our insurance, then that would be one thing, but the committee could develop that. But as far as sponsoring everything, the city can't do everything. We should only just do a few things on the Christmas parade, Veterans Parade, brings people downtown, so businesses should be happy with that. The 4th of July, same thing. And of course, that's a patriotic community effort. Douglas Days, things like that. But the other things, like I'm just saying, I don't want to make anybody angry, but I don't know if I know the street rods, for example. Well, if they want to use the park, well, that's fine. They can go to the special events committee and they can say, well, we'd like to do this, and it doesn't cost the city because other than police and things like that. But we're not sponsoring it. We're letting them utilize our services.
So I think what I'm hearing from council members is that there's kind of two issues here. There's one, I think we'd all prefer a list of what do we want to be involved with, and secondly, a list to handle all other a policy to handle all other requests. Does that make sense? That's kind of summarized?
Yes,
Yeah,
Where
and-
we're at, Mr. Shelton, please.
And also have them do it before budget.
Right.
Have them make a request before the budget.
Right, and
But-
it's, I don't think it's gonna cause us a lot of heartache in the budget, but we need to know that this is what we budgeted for, and this is, and of course, you know, I would suggest we put a little bit more for those events that do come up, that we need to improvise. We've all seen improvisation this year, and it could happen just the other way. We could all of a sudden, you know, somebody reminded me today about a carne asada that somebody made mention of here a while back, that, you know, to celebrate once we can all take off these masks and go about our life. But so I think, is that two different issues? I think is, so let's focus in on the policy one today. Is there things that you'd like to see, or how we can run that, or how we can set the policy so that the staff can feel comfortable implementing it? Mr. Valdenegro, do you have a thought?
I have a question. I just want to know how the insurance part is for the city, the liability when it's 4th of July event, and whether the person that take out permits to rent the casitas or the, what do you call it, the campground there? The Ramadas. What happens there? I just want to know, because it's a 4th of July event sponsored by the city, citywide, fireworks, everything. What happens with the liabilities for it?
Mr. Valdenegro, members of council, I'm not sure if I can answer that question for you, but I mean, going off of memory, from what I remember, typically the 4th of July, and we can start with the parade. I think the city sponsors that one. With the, if we were to have some type of fiestas, and just going off memory, like I said, we would typically ask the sponsoring party for liability insurance. From what I recall, like for example, you had the Fiesta Patrias that was put on by a certain organization, and then the youth football organization also did some other fiesta, but typically we would ask them to provide, something's coming to me now. So remember that if like the youth sports activities are waived according to our Title 12. So that's one of the waivers that we have right now. So if you're doing a special event that's going to benefit either cultural education or youth sports activities, then you're exempt from that provision. So to answer your question, we typically have the organization that put on the party, put on the fiesta, handle the liability insurance. And I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going from memory. It's been a while since we had a party.
Councilmember Hewish, Councilmember Valdenegro, let me step back a little bit and put these events into context. One example is like the 4th of July. That's a city event. We have a list of events, and I don't know if you remember the budget presentations that we had. There was a series of lists throughout the year. Those are the city events that the city puts on through the Leisure Services Department. We're the main organizations hosting that. We can partner with other people, but it's an actual city event run by a city. We use our resources, and they're usually the annual events that you see, like Trunk or Treat, Douglas Days, parades, a Christmas parade, the tree lighting ceremony. Those are what we have in our budget already. Then you have the other component, it's the leagues. Leagues use our facilities, so that's kind of a way we, technically partner with them, is we allow them to use our facilities. They pay their fee. All organizations right now, sports leagues, including the youth, they have their own liability insurance as well. So there's not necessarily a request, or I have never seen a request since I've been with the city that requests that type of request from the city, the liability. They may request help with funds through the youth activity funds and just different ways. We do that, more of in-kind support, helping them set up the field and stuff like that. The other, Mr. Montenegro, the 4th of July, the ramadas, well, at least at that time, they're not used by the public because we basically have the whole park, and that way they're not, fighting for one ramada, because we've seen that in the past. And it allows our staff to use one of the main ramadas for our home base, if you will, our headquarters. So the other part is these organizations, Fiestas Patrias, downtown merchants that are not necessarily driven by the city, like our events, but something that, a request that's coming in by the Douglas merchants or Pop Warner for the Fiestas Patrias parade. That's the other part where these requests are coming in. So we have our sponsorship or our events, special events that we do that are put on by the city, funded by the city, and then the other part of that is the events that come from our other organizations that want to do events, and then they go through our process. And if it's problematic, if they can't fulfill, the insurance requirement, that's kind of, where we're at in that process of how they get there.
Does that make sense?
If I can add to that.
Please.
Also the difference is the city-sponsored event is that we're in control of those events. Our staff, working under our liability insurance, we have direct control of that. When we give up that control with somebody, a third party coming in, utilizing our grounds or our property, that's where we're talking about we need some protection from those either leagues or special events that come and utilize for whatever event the city property and is not under the city's direct control. That's when we're seeking out how do we basically protect the event and protect the city. Back to the ramadas have rules of operation as well. When you rent the ramada, you're supposed to do or not do certain things, not drink during certain hours. You have it for the day, and you pay for that ramada, and you basically recreate using the park and the ramada. So that's basically within the proper use of the park. You don't need liability insurance for the use of the ramada because you're basically saying, I'm going to utilize this space and within the general rules of a park. So that's why we don't require anything special when somebody's renting a ramada.
Right, and just to add to that, when someone's renting a ramada, it falls under the city. When we get liability insurance, we get liability insurance for the facilities and, parks and things that we have. So all of those things are covered. So if there's something that happens at the ramada outside of our control, residents always have that ability to file a claim with our insurance, and then it goes through our insurance. So those things are covered, but it's just in a different way.
Okay. Any other comments on how we should approach the policy? Yes.
I would say that strategic focus would probably encompass all of these, under what types of events should the city sponsor. With working with this, working to try to get the trying to get the strategic plan going. I know that a lot of these things are events or goals to try to get us to that final goal that is important. So, I know the insurance is a big deal, but like it's been mentioned, a lot of these events aren't anything new or out of the ordinary. I think we know ahead of time. It's just maybe getting them placed on a budget, and I guess most of them are already if they're city sponsored. These bigger ones, like the parades, I guess. The only one I can think of that may not be sponsored by us might be this Veterans Day parade. I don't know if I'm missing one.
No, Fiestas Patrias when they have it.
Okay. But I don't know, I'm just thinking, you know, we do need to try to focus on the strategic plan and try to get more events. And the special event committee would be a good place, you know, for these events that aren't scheduled or sometimes come up all of a sudden, for them to review and see, you know, how they fall under that strategic plan. Is it something that would be beneficial to our citizens, and just follow the strategic plan when it comes to the events.
Thank you very much. So in order to, you pose these questions to us, from my input is that what types of events should the city sponsor? I think all those are very good. The attendance minimum, I'm not sure how you do that unless it happens one year and we say, you know what, we're not going to help you next year. Or if you come next year, we're going to say, hey, you know, you only had 15 people there, and you know, we'd like to at least have an event of 100 plus. So if we set that minimum, and there's no recourse other than, you know, lesson learned, we're not going to proceed, but I'd like to hear from staff, you know, if you have a number, if you think that it needs to be 100 or 75 or 3, of how many, you know, people would it benefit to be able to at least use some in-kind services from the city. What type of events should the city not sponsor? Those are two great obvious ones that are there. I'm not sure. None other come to mind. I don't know if anybody else has anything that we shouldn't.
Maybe
You know,
religious.
Well, and let's talk about that, because I know we have. We used to have some there at the Castro Park on an occasional Friday evening. They would have a gathering. I don't know how our involvement was or what we did with that. Would you explain that?
Absolutely. Mr. Hewish, one of the applications that we issued a permit to was for one of the churches to use our premises. So I believe that's acceptable. I think if the city were to turn and sponsor and then give, you know, money or funds other than what is regularly provided by the parks, would be a different story. So I think that's you know, you can look at them both ways, and if it's, you know, monetary support beyond what is already provided at the park would be probably something the city shouldn't sponsor. Although we have helped support churches when they have their festivities. We work with all churches. They put in their requests, they meet the requirements. The city's not necessarily sponsoring them other than providing services through a regular application process.
So maybe that needs to be spelled out specifically as far as this is the only way we help in religious type activities. Does that make sense? Is that everybody? Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Lindeman, please.
When it comes to mind, you know, things that benefit the city as far as events, you know, if we bring events, we bring people, and then and hopefully new money's into our community. Mexican baseball went really well the first year, and I think it was trying to be overdone the second year, and so it kind of fell flat. But you know, that brought in people. And so I think we could look at those, but not necessarily, I don't know how that was set up. If it was the city would sponsor that or partner, or I don't know how that.
It was the city. Right? Took the lead. But you're absolutely right, Mr. Lindeman, about, you know, bringing people into the community. If they can show that in their plan, that definitely needs to be considered. And I think those are part of the criteria that you're asking. What criteria should be used? I think those list at the top as far as, and you know, staff wants to provide us input on, you know, what's most important and which ones, if you want to develop a rating system or whatever you would feel comfortable with to do that. It may be nitpicking too much. I don't know. You guys need to tell us how we can make your job easier to be able to evaluate those kind of things. So So that's how I think it should be, evaluated when it comes, that you develop an application like you have now, but of course with some of these, you ask them, what do you feel the benefit is to the city? Please express that to us. And then, I think in the special event committee, like you have, a member of police, member of fire, a member of finance, obviously you guys, and whoever else would be involved in that, even to the point of requiring them to come make a presentation to you to make sure that that's something that you'd like to do. So, any other input on the process? I think that's what Ms. Smith's looking for, so she can develop. Yes, Ms.
I'm reading over the sample policy that you provided us, and there's a good one here. Number 3 on organizations that discriminate based on age, race, sex, sexual orientation, not to be eligible for sponsorship. I think that would be a good one to follow. And then I think the top 2 are already on. Well, the first one's religious organizations, which we just talked about. But then you have the political one, which is also a good one, not to be eligible for sponsorship. And then, yeah, they are good. There's this other one with providing restricted guest list.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't want to make anybody feel left out. The only one I have a question on, and it's on their policy, but for-profit organizations. For example, is the Douglas Downtown Merchants a for-profit organization? I mean, they're essentially promoting their businesses, which is for personal gain. So I don't know if they would fall under the for-profit organization, and then that would, keep us from helping them, which obviously we want to help our downtown merchants.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure that they're officially organized.
Okay.
But Ms. Prince, do you have any?
Yeah, so they are organized, still working on pulling that together, but they are, in the very beginning of their organization. I think from the perspective of us as staff and looking at, they're a nonprofit, typically organizations like that for businesses are a nonprofit. It's not a 501c3, but it's typically a 501c6. But we look at the event, and I think from our perspective, staff would look at, as a committee, would look at the event itself and whether or not that event is promoting that. The event that they had brought to us was not an event that included those types of things. It was truly a community event, which is why we had it on our list as a consideration to support that. They had vendors there for, just different vendors for the community, and they wanted music and other things, so it wasn't a business-centric event that they were proposing.
Okay. If I may add some clarification, because I think needs to be said. When the word sponsorship is being said, for our purposes right now is whenever somebody's seeking sponsorship, it's seeking the city to help them in something that they can accomplish within the existing policy. So in other words, we require liability insurance in all events. I don't have liability insurance. Can the city sponsor me? Because we issue permits for profit, for religious organizations. They're able to meet all of the regulations that are currently in place. It's not that we're looking at doing away with those. It's that what is it that which events are we sponsoring, going above the city actually helping them meet the requirements of the policy. That's I think what we're referring to as far as sponsorship, and not that we're not going to issue permits to religious organizations, political organizations, because they've been able to meet the guidelines.
Okay, so that makes it much more clear, and I appreciate that. So we're probably referring to just normal operations. In other words, we're going to pick up the trash if they have trash in their event. We normally pick up trash in the park, and that's what we do. But if they start talking about, can you bring me 5 bleachers, that's when we say, whoa, we can't do that.
Correct. And if there's
Right.
any request for
those.
money,
Right.
and then anything beyond my police.
Right. Or if they think it's a political rally and they think they need additional police force, then they need to contract that somehow through a private agency or whatever. Does that make sense now? That makes it a lot clearer. Thank you. Very much so. Time-wise, how do you want to proceed with this? Do you want to draft a policy similar to, not similar, but in what we've talked about tonight? Do you have enough information?
Yeah, I
to
think
do
this
that?
was a great start. I think that really understanding what mayor and council is really considering for these type of events, because that's kind of where we've heard that dialogue, and I think this is a great start. We have done our research on a lot of this. That's kind of why some of the like criteria and some of the committees have come about. So we have done our research. We have certain things in place, but we really, more than anything, wanted to come forward and bring this to you so that way we can consider everything that we talk about here and put it into a really good policy that we can have for a while.
So are we talking August or September?
August deadline is coming up, and when is the deadline for agenda items for August?
Friday.
Next week.
September.
Or September, is that?
It's up to you. We'll move on it as quick as you want us to.
I'll get with the interim city manager, and we'll come up. We're probably going to shoot for September. That way, we have enough time to really, look back
Digest some of those
at
things.
everything that we're considering.
Yeah. So as soon as you have a draft policy, don't wait for the agenda. If you wouldn't mind sending it out to us ahead of time, so that we can individually jot down some things there and send them back to you, not to each other. We would just individually, we would jot them down and send them back to Ms. Prince or Ms. Smith. Everybody understand? That makes sense? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 5. I apologize, Ms. Rocio, and you're going to be upset when I say this, but we're trying to hold these to an hour and a half at the most. What is the council's feelings? Do you want to stay on and go through this? Is there anything pending that we need to get after right away that we need to discuss so we can vote on it in an upcoming meeting? Why don't we answer that question first? Is there something pending that we need to get after?
There's not. I mean, I have the job descriptions already. There was
Right.
more if you guys had any suggestions as to any changes that you wanted to recommend before actually voting on it. We do have, I just had a quick presentation as to how we do a job description review. I can go through it quickly. I know a lot of you
What's the pleasure of the
hungry.
council?
I have some comments on the city manager.
So what about doing it tonight or doing it at our next study session, which would be in August? That's what I'd like to get a feedback right now from everyone.
The job descriptions can wait. I mean, as far as
Right.
since whenever you guys feel like approving them.
I know
They
we're not-
can wait for September.
Right.
They don't have to be in the August.
I know we're not voting, but who wants to continue on with the, right now? Anybody want to continue on right now? Okay.
I can wait. There was a couple of questions on there, on the city clerk.
And you guys can also, come to me as well directly. If you have
Individually?
anything individually,
Yeah.
that you might have a question on that I could clarify, we can do that as well.
What do we have on this work session? Do we know yet?
What do we have in August already for a work session?
We have I'll have to look, I'm sorry.
There was one thing, I remember one thing.
I was just gonna say, if it's just one, then, but I mean, if there's several, then we're already here.
No, I think there's just one. I think we limited it to one.
Well, you folks at work, that's what I'm kind of looking towards.
It's fine. My
Are you-
questions can wait, or I can address it with.
I can address those
Your presentation is how long?
I can make it real quick.
Would you like to listen to the, oh, we're done? Okay. Yeah, I promised an hour and a half at the most, so I apologize. We'll
I'll make it quick, super quick.
Right.
We won't go over the.
You have 6 minutes.
The last three.
That's right,
Yeah.
wasted. We have 6 minutes so I can have a minute to adjourn. Oh, now you have 5.
So last year we started making some job description changes due to the reorganization that we had. Then it became apparent that we needed to do it for all of our departments, at least to review to see which ones were needed. So, so far we've done police, fire, development services, management services, leisure services, library, and housing. And the only 2 areas that we have pending right now is administration and public works. So administration was going to be the one that was going to come up in August, but we can move it to September. And it gives me more time to work on the public works job descriptions as well. So I'm not mad at that. So what is the purpose of a job description? It's a formal document that outlines the essential duties, responsibilities, and requirements and skills that are needed to perform the job. It is used for our training and development of employees, and it's used when conducting employees' annual performance evaluations. We use it for recruitments, when we do the initial hirings and promotions. And they should be a living document, reviewed often as needed because things change throughout the year. Or throughout the years. And so how do we do the review of these job descriptions? So one of the major things that we look at is that the list of essential functions that each job description has. These are really important because they tell the applicants and the incumbents in the position what are the major functions that they're expected to be performing. We review them. We review these essential functions with the supervisor, with the incumbent when needed, and we also look at similar job descriptions from other cities. We determine what is no longer applicable, what needs to be modified, and if there's something missing that needs to be added. Like I said, things change. Technology that we use changes, so we have to be updating our job descriptions to reflect that. We discuss if the minimum qualifications outlined in the job description are still applicable. So we focus on determining what experience and/or education is needed to be able to perform the essential functions. And we also discuss this with the supervisor and compare with similar job descriptions from other cities to be able to stay within the guidelines that we have. We look at any special requirements the position might have, such as certifications, licenses, endorsements. And we also like to see if there's any special working conditions that should be mentioned, such as working on enclosed spaces, exposure to fumes, smells, chemicals, working on weekends, and things like that. And something also that's really important for us that we consider if we're reviewing our job descriptions is our internal structure. And what I mean by that is that we have levels of classifications where we need to ensure that we're being fair with the requirements and over the functions assigned to the position. For example, in the levels of our assistant city manager, our directors, and our managers, there are differences in responsibilities and salary. So therefore, there's differences in requirements as well. For the deputy city manager, we have a bachelor's, so 7 years of experience is a requirement. For directors, we have a bachelor's in 5 years, and for our managers, we have a bachelor's in 3 years. So those differences in responsibilities require differences in requirements as well, and it also justifies the differences in salary. And that's it, because then we were going to go into the 3 job descriptions that we were going to review. I'm not sure that they get a copy of that presentation, or I can send that to you so you guys can have the summarized components as far as the education required, the experience, and the appointments, if they're made by council or not. Because what we did is compare it to the 13 cities that we can compare ourselves to. For those that responded to us, there's a few that didn't give us their job descriptions, but for those that did, then we outlined it out there for you guys so you guys can see that it's not just us putting whatever we want. It's actually within the market, comparable to what we have as well within the city. So we did that for the city attorney, for the city clerk, and the city manager. So I'll send that over. I'll send that over to you guys as well.
We don't have that, I don't believe.
Yeah, I got the one for the city attorney, but were the one for the city clerk and the city manager included in the,
In the email, yes, they should have been included, the
Alright,
job
we got
description.
In a different attachment.
Yeah, there was 3 different attachments.
okay.
Okay, so the plan of action is to send your comments or questions over to Ms. Rocio, and she'll get back to you as far as input. And if you'd like to discuss it more, please let Ms. Prince know, and so whether or not, then we'll make the decision whether we'll be on August or whether we'll have it in part of a study session in August and then vote on it in September. Because it's important, so please provide that additional input also. Make sense?
I will provide you with the presentation, so that way you get to see the comparables, the cities and the salaries and what they require, so that I think that will help kind of as you're looking at these job descriptions as well.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Okay, item number 7, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Johnny on the spot, second by Mrs. Morales to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Motion carries, we stand adjourned. Thank you for your patience, an hour and a half. That was the max.
So for August, the deadline's tomorrow.